With the denoising process, I'm wondering why you kind of had an intuition that you could distill it to one step, because I mean, that kind of suggests that there's a one-to-one correspondence between a particular image set of noise and a particular image, when in fact it's a trajectory of the probability distribution in multiple discrete trajectory, but a trajectory. So maybe that's what you discovered. I don't know.
So, I mean, well, multiple layers to my answer, I guess. So you have multiple versions of this denoising diffusion. There's a stochastic version and there's a deterministic version. So it's a little easier to think about in the deterministic version, in which case you have a single trajectory, and then you just have a single n image corresponding to one input noise. It's a little messy because it's not one-to-one in the other direction. Like the forward process is not necessarily as one-to-one. So I think that's one of the challenges. And essentially, the intuition that it can be done, I mean, I guess in research, you take a lot of leaps of faith, and it's more a hope than belief. And a lot of people had wanted to do that because it's like, well, this is taking n steps. Boy, wouldn't it be faster if it took only one step? So I think a lot of people figured that this would be a good thing. It's really lifting this constraint that you use the same mapping that was the big thing. And if I want to be fully honest with you, I'm also not convinced that this mapping from noise to images is the right way to generate these images from scratch. I mean, it's been surprisingly powerful, but I'm not convinced that this is the end of the story. Just like as an aside, I'm not convinced that LLMs and the way we do all this generative AI is necessarily the thing that's going to make it at the end. I mean, certainly you may have heard that Jan LeCun so one of the Turing Award winners for deep learning is very skeptical of LLMs as the long-term solution to artificial general intelligence. I'm also not convinced that denoising diffusion will necessarily be the last step on the road.
Along with the lines of denoising images, what's the current research going on in respect to like text in images, like where the objects are like really small, whereas like in cats and dogs or like cars in an image, the objects are pretty big. So probably that is a little bit easier compared to like someone sending you their health records with a image taken of that health record, which is differently oriented, or like the text is not clear and stuff like that. So how do you feel about that domain?
So it really depends in the direction we're talking about. So if you want to go from text to images, I think we've got very little at this point. I mean, I think that's part of the big challenge, that right now you've got this pretty blunt instrument that you have a piece of text, and people are making them longer and longer, but you can only do that so much. And then you've got a big image, and as I said, we try to impose a little more structure in there, but it's still at the granularity of pretty big things, like a full human, another full human, and the level of control we have for the generation of these images is still pretty limited. In the other direction, I think things are a little easier. But then it depends on the quality, because I think one of the things you mentioned is that maybe the text is blurry and all that. I mean, we're really at a point where I think if a human can solve the problem in the forward direction, the AI is pretty good at that too, right? So, if you as a human can read the text, I'm not saying necessarily that there is a pre-trained model that will solve your problem for you, but I'd be pretty confident that a good team will manage to solve the problem for you. If you're trying to go to superhuman performance, then we'll have to negotiate. And my level of optimism, is not 0%, but it's more around 50%, depending, how far you want to push it. I mean, clearly we have techniques to deal with blur, with noise, etc., depending on what you can afford. I mean, if you can control some of the imaging conditions, there are things that can be done. But yeah, it becomes more challenging. Yeah.
Very interesting talk and a lot of information. I'm more excited to see how many 2D pictures are required to build a 3D image. Just for example, if I want to build a car engine, I don't know the other side of the story, but how can it be a 3D image that will be really, how do you validate that the 3D image is the right image that you are creating?
It really depends on the level of quality you want on the output side. So these days, the answer can be as low as 0, right? Because you can put a text saying a car engine, and you can generate a 3D model of a car engine. Then is it exactly the one you wanted? Is the quality good enough? Are you interested as well in what's inside, all the different pieces and all that? Then it's a lot harder. I mean, in terms of quality, where are these images? That'll give you a sense of the level of geometric sophistication that we get these days. I think it's a little, people who train diffusion models on 3D data, they get better 3D outputs, but not necessarily the same diversity, because again, we don't have a ton of training data. So if you happen to be someone who has a huge data set of car engines because that's your business, that will make it easier to solve that problem. Yeah, I mean, 3D is really still very much at the frontier, but it's getting pretty good, especially if all you care about is appearance. It's easier because we can leverage 2D data a lot more. If you care more about the structure and especially the internals, then it's much, much harder. Mm-hmm.